Okay. Well, again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Thompson, and on behalf of NAMMBA, I want to invite and welcome you to today's webinar, which is featuring LEP borrowers, education, challenges, and considerations. And so we are excited today to have a panel of distinguished experts. Excuse me there. All love my technical difficulties there. Which is being put on today by our Diamond Plus partner, Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. We want to thank them for helping to sponsor the webinar today, as well as providing some great leadership and subject matter expertise in this topic area. First, before we get into the presentation and our webinar, I just want to remind everyone on behalf of NAMMBA, we are excited to announce and launch that we are live with Connect 2021. Save the date, September the 16th through the 19th in Atlanta, Georgia. We have an early bird special going on right now in recognition and celebration of our 5th anniversary. We want to make sure you know that anyone who purchased their tickets between now and July 31st, they will have an opportunity. We're going to select 5 ticket holders who will receive an all expense paid trip to NAMMBA, airfare, VIP accommodations, and also 3 nights lodging. We're giving away 5 of those guys to the conference this year in Atlanta, Georgia, with a private reception as well from me to help celebrate our 5th anniversary. But wait, there's more. I love those commercials at late at night when they're talking about 1995. And here's the other important part. In addition to that, we're going to pick and select 5 additional winners, and one of those 5 will win $5,000 live on stage at the beginning of our conference to help celebrate our 5th anniversary at NAMMBA Connect. And guys, I want to also just share a personal testimony. Today, I started my first or participated in my first live conference event, and it was a phenomenal feeling, meeting a lot of friends and just industry partners and just being in a room, listening to other people speak. It was beautiful. And so I'm really encouraged and really excited about NAMMBA Connect. So make sure you save the date for that. We're going to move on and talk about and introduce today's speakers. And then we'll hand it over to Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group to kick off and certainly start today's conversation. First, I'd like to introduce Amanda Tucker with Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. Amanda serves as the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer for Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. Amanda has oversight of the organization's risk management and operational compliance, financial intelligence, and human capital functions for the organization, as well as she has an extensive background in community financial institutions as well. And she's also a certified, a CRCM, certified regulatory, Amanda pronounced that for me, certified regulatory compliance manager. My notes are cut off here a little bit, as well as a certified money laundering specialist and a CICA. Amanda currently serves as the director of the board of is that BS, Amanda?
Yep. So it's an industry coalition focused on providing affordable training to the industry. Most of our membership is smaller institutions where access to industry education is not always feasible due to the cost.
Great. And last but not least, she's the executive director of ACAMS Virginia board as well. Thank you, Amanda, for joining and being our moderator for today. Also, we have Mia Jones with Freddie Mac. Mia is an affordable lending manager and a single family client part of the organization for Freddie Mac. The affordable lending team is committed to ensuring that clients and the community have the right offerings to support responsible lending, provide sustainable home ownership, and access to credit for all borrowers. Mia supports the lending and banking segments and works with them to execute plans for meeting affordable lending community outreach, as well as analyzes market data to identify trends and opportunities and develop ways to obviously leverage that market information. Third, we have Carolina Millman. Carolina Millman is a senior mortgage banker at Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. She relocated, or she lived in South America and relocated to North Carolina as a young adult. She's joined the mortgage industry and then has quickly learned the ins and outs through working with Atlantic Bay Mortgage, and is very passionate about serving home buyers in her communities and beyond in Spanish as well. She has a love of soccer and her affinity for Disney musicals. Carolina, any favorite musical you want to share?
I just love Disney in general, like everything Disney. I use my children as an excuse, but
Great.
yeah.
Well, I just came from Disney, which is where we had our Florida Mortgage Bankers Convention. And so I can truly tell you Disney is kind of packed right
Oh,
now
I'm jealous.
in Orlando, Florida. To this, Carolina, excuse me, focuses on really helping people achieve their home ownership goals while building long-lasting relationships. And she's a very successful producer for Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. And so congratulations on your success thus far as well, Carolina.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Charmaine Brown. Charmaine serves as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Mortgage Bankers Association. She's responsible for expanding MBA's strategic framework to ensure that diversity and inclusion is forefront into their members and working with their members, and are embedded throughout its programs, practices, and member services. Charmaine also led Fannie Mae's diversity and inclusion engagement and outreach, as well as working through the Office of Omni, which is the OMWI, for the last decade. And she was also responsible for implementing diversity and inclusion, external engagement, and outreach strategies for her organization. Please join me, guys, in welcoming our speakers as well as our participants for today's webinar. I'm now going to turn it over to Amanda Tucker to start our presentation. As a reminder, we will be taking questions later on through out this webinar presentation. If you have a question, please use your chat feature, and then I will be coming back to join at the conclusion to participate in a small Q&A given time, and then we'll go from there. Amanda, we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Tony. A huge thank you to NAMMBA. It's truly an honor to participate in this session and focus on a topic that I know our Atlantic Bay team is incredibly passionate about, alongside Mia and Charmaine. This is a fantastic panel. And today aside, I have really enjoyed over the last several weeks getting to spend a lot of time with this panel preparing for today's session. I know I have certainly learned a lot. So before we dive into some of the dialogue with the panel, one thing we wanted to focus on is the CFPB guidance that brought us to today's session. So in January of 2021, the CFPB issued their statement regarding limited English proficiency, so our LEP consumers. And so the guidance offered a lot of insight into compliance guidelines going forward that really encouraged institutions to work to meet the needs of their LEP consumers. You know, historically, there was a lot of confusion in the industry, and I think at times hesitance for institutions to really work with, provide marketing materials, disclosures, communications, in a language other than English. I think there was this connotation that there was some risk with respect to the unfair deceptive acts practices regulation, as well as fair lending and regulation B. So what we saw is this statement from the CFPB in January of this year really removed those roadblocks. And so the statement was primarily focused on encouraging institutions to take an approach that was suited to their respective organization. So considering pilot programs, considering a variety of compliance approaches that would vary with the institution's complexity and capability. So a lot of an institution's LEP program is really going to be driven by their geography. What are the needs of their respective communities? So the key takeaways that we really learned from this guidance was that institutions should focus first on what languages other than English make sense for them to provide to their LEP consumers, as well as where in the product and program life cycle it made sense to introduce materials in a language other than English. A lot of our panel's focus today will really focus on program considerations, but most importantly, education. So Charmaine, given your work with the NAMMBA and your broad and vast background, what impact do you see to the industry with respect to this guidance?
Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to my fellow panelists. I do want to thank Atlantic Bay and NAMMBA for this really important discussion today. I also want to add to my introduction, it is Pride Month and I am cisgendered. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I really believe in being the change that I want to see. So I needed to do that. What we are talking about today with LEP goes to the heart and the spirit of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're talking about economic inclusion. We know primarily economic inclusion. We know where we are as an industry in terms of the homeownership rate. We know where we are as an industry in terms of the demographic shifts. We are in a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multicultural society. And so in order to serve our society holistically, we have to think about the people who are furthest from the norm and make sure that we're bringing them into the process. And so I see this as a great thing for the industry, as a great thing for consumers. Now, there are a lot of nuances. We're talking about language, but I see language and culture as intertwined. So while we are, making sure that we have documents in the language of the marketplace and the consumers that we're trying to reach, we also need to make sure we understand the culture and the cultural nuances. You have families who come to this country from English-speaking countries, but they don't necessarily understand American culture. Their visible dimension of diversity may be one thing. You may look at them and think that they are X when they're actually not. And so organizations, in preparing for the compliance aspects, need to also think about your workforce. To what degree does your workforce represent your market and represent the growing diversity within the communities? So I'll stop there, Amanda, but I really see it as economic inclusion, which is a good thing. It's a move towards being much more inclusive and much more expansive to the communities that we serve.
Absolutely. And 2021 really started off not only with the CFPB guidance, but we saw the introduction of the revised Uniform Residential Loan Application. And one of the most critical components of that was the opportunity for the consumer to identify and select their language preference. So as we really focus on, education, we'll talk a little bit about education of the consumer and then education of the lender. Mia, I know you are so passionate. You've got an incredible background. Share with us a little bit more on Freddie Mac's education and support of the lender in this space.
Absolutely, that's such a great, important thing. Freddie Mac is dedicated. We are really dedicated to making sure that we support our lenders by offering products and services and tools and resources that can empower them to be able to go out to work with all borrowers, not just the borrower down the street, but the borrower way down in the next neighborhood that might not have the opportunities that we have here. Freddie Mac is part of this great big ecosystem. We talk about that all the time. And in that ecosystem, we have our loan officers, we have our mortgage people, we have the local, state, and county government. So there's a whole lot of people that are involved in this process to making sure that we provide support to each other to get and reach that person who's trying to obtain home ownership. One of the things that we like to focus on are 4 pillars, which is insights, which is the first one. Insights is we do a lot of research. We provide a lot of background information to help understand the market, help understand our customer, and to be able to reach out to those underserved communities. We also provide education. We do events such as these. We do training in and outside of the office. Of course, that's to be determined when that'll happen again as far as inside. However, we like to go out. We like to go into the community and provide that education. We also provide mortgage products. We have our signature products, our affordable products that are designed to help the low to moderate, very low income borrowers. And then we have our business solutions where we're going out and we're helping our loan officers and their lenders figure out ways of getting more business. We try to help, we do help with getting business and growing your business, because it's not about just how many loans can I close, but how many people can I touch? So we provide strategies to help with those as well. So we have those 4 pillars again: insights, education, mortgage products, and business solutions to help educate our loan officers and our partners.
Great. So I think one of the important things too is to focus on the consumer end. And so Carolina, I know so much of your career has really been dedicated and focused to working with your LEP borrowers and making sure that there is clarity and transparency throughout the process. So talk to us a little bit around your education and the work that you do directly with your borrowers and what's important for them to have available as they travel through their home ownership and home loan process.
Yeah. So for me, obviously is Spanish, because I am Colombian, so I speak Spanish. And that has been my focus through my career. I think I do probably about 80% of my business is Spanish speaking, or has been, through the years. And one of the things that usually my team and I joke around is trying to sort of bridge that gap and get rid of what we call language brokers, right? I myself was that to my parents when I was a teenager, so that process was, they're buying their house, and as a 16-year-old, I'm the one translating for them because there wasn't anyone that spoke Spanish on the real estate side or on the lending side. And so, although I understood the language, I really didn't understand what I was telling them that they were doing. And so in turn, they didn't understand what they were doing. And we see that still, so I'm always honored to be able to serve them in the language that they prefer. I'm excited about this program because as much as I love spending time educating them, knowing that they will actually be able to go back and read through something and fully understand it, I can't even express to you how important that is. But I do spend a lot of time with them. We say it takes a lot of hand holding, and I'm happy to do that because, and I don't think still they ask all the questions, right? I try so hard to go over all of the information and translate the documents to the best of my knowledge. But a lot of times, even terms, right? It's so hard to explain to somebody a term that might not exist in their language. So that has been sort of my goal, is to bridge that gap and be able to give them the service that they deserve in the language that they know. Because a lot of people even, you know, might be bilingual, but they're just way more comfortable speaking in their native language, even if they do understand English and can sort of read through the documents. And so it's very important to me to be able to spend that time with them, letting them have that driver's seat. And a lot of the time, I feel like for a lot of my borrowers that are buying a home for the first time, they're grandparents, you know, they're like our baby boomers. And so there's also that technology sort of limitation as well. And we spend a lot of time making sure that we give them all the information in the language that they understand.
So, and Carolina, I think you're touching on something that's very important in the sense that a lot of LEP programs are becoming more feasible for institutions because of technology. And so organizations having to have that balance of being able to rely on technology to offer materials in a language other than English, while being cognizant of the fact that, I think to your point, some of these LEP consumers may not have ready access to technology, or they may not prefer to utilize technology. So Charmaine, as an industry, how do we understand kind of consistently throughout the industry what our educational needs will be? Where should organizations start the conversation if they're joining us today and saying, hey, I think that this would be a really great program to offer in our community? How do they take that first step? What type of education is important before you can start offering materials in a language other than English?
That is a great question, Amanda. And I do want to go back to a couple of things that Carolina said, because I think this cannot be overstated. When you talk about language brokers and people who are standing in the space, standing in the gap, being that bridge, very important. But where we want to get to when we talk about equity is closing that gap. And so to your question, Amanda, to the extent that you have done the research, you understand your current, you have sound and current data, you understand the demographic trends, you also know you have the data around your current market and how you're serving your current market. I think you bring your employees involved. One of the untapped resources that we have in our companies today are employee resource groups. I think 90% of the companies in our industry have employee resource groups. They reflect the diversity in the marketplace. So having conversations with your employee resource groups about their own lived experiences and connecting the dots with what your research and your data is telling you about your growing market segment, your current and your growing market segment. What are those trends? Technology is great, but the need for speed and the need to scale could sometimes result in unintended consequences. So I would also say that while we rely on technology, we should be very cautious about the limitations of technology and ensure that we're moving forward in ways that will not result in any kind of unintended consequences. And I just want to share very quickly a story that I think speaks to the heart of today's discussion on LEP. Very, very quickly, during the foreclosure crises, I was working with servicers to do some outreach work. And there was a woman who was just sobbing when I showed up at the event. She did not speak English. Long story short, we found a language broker to help us understand the situation, and she didn't own her home. She bought the home from someone who was a language broker, and they could translate, but she didn't understand. So it's in the best interest of everyone in this industry to make sure that the processes that we put in place think about the life cycle and also speak to sustainability, because I think that's a really important part of the conversation as well.
Excellent. And I think that you're touching on something that for anyone joining us today, this is really an area of the industry where I'll say there's no competition. I think that all of us as industry professionals and peers have a responsibility to collaborate and share information. So if you're an organization really starting your LEP journey, leverage some of the contacts through this session. That is the nature of what NAMMBA is looking to do with respect to their industry outreach. So with that, I want to turn over to program considerations, because I think a lot of your program considerations are going to be rooted in education. And I will share that at Atlantic Bay, as we kind of started our LEP journey more than a year ago, we focused, to Charmaine's point, on our market data to really understand where this would be meaningful and impactful. But then the second thing we did was to understand the products and programs available. So Mia, we would love to hear from you on what your product and programs look like for an LEP borrower.
Great, thank you so much. That's a great question, because it is something that's at the center of our focus right now, just making sure that everyone has an opportunity to obtain home ownership. And as Charmaine mentioned, it's about sustainability as well. So we want to make sure that we have programs that not only educate on how to obtain a mortgage, how to get that loan, or how to get into that house, but how to keep it, because that's important. The information that you might, that some of the things that we might tell them, what might be, may stem around budgeting, something as simple as, now that you're in this home, well, how did you keep it? Because now you have these things that you didn't have at first. You didn't have that mortgage payment and that insurance. You didn't have that maintenance and the upkeep of the home. All of these things have to be considered. So we provide education for LEP borrowers as well. The good thing about Freddie Mac is that we offer something called Homebuyer U. Homebuyer U is a complete, it's a wealth of information for anyone interested in obtaining and then staying in their home. We provide education from soup to nuts, as we say, from obtaining from figuring out who do you want to contact, who do you call when you're ready to make this big step. Sometimes someone reaches out to a friend, but then there are others that just don't know where to start, and they may not have a friend in the mortgage industry. So we provide information on how to go about that. Who do you call? Where do you start? And then we provide information about credit. We provide our Credit Smart program, which is a great product. It's very useful for all borrowers. Now, the LEP borrowers, we've got something a little bit special, because we're now teaching that in Spanish. We started that a few years ago. And I do want to mention something that I'm not sure if you're all aware of, but the Federal Housing Finance Association Administration, along with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and a couple of other industries, developed a program where there are, it's in 6 languages. I believe that the languages are Spanish, Chinese, Korean. The other 2, I know one is one, I just had to figure out what that meant. It was Tagalog, and Vietnamese. So we do offer, that information is offered, and it provides not only a copy of, or the information about it, but the translated document. Even explains what everything means. What's the point? What's an origination fee? So we provide all of that information to make sure that our LEP borrowers have all the information at their fingertips. You know, the concern, of course, as Charmaine mentioned, was the information and having the internet or not having access to the internet. Well, here we at Freddie Mac, we have mortgage professionals, and we have people in place that can assist those LEP borrowers that don't have access to that information. So we provide a lot of resources, and we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to obtain homeownership.
Great. So before we talk a little bit around documentation and LEP consumer challenges that Carolina sees on the mortgage banker side, I just want to remind everyone we're just over halfway through today's session. Make sure that you ask your questions. I know towards the end, Tony will put those forward to the panel, but I don't know any other session where you will have this much knowledge and expertise across so many different industry partners. So make sure that you take advantage and take the opportunity to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll keep going right until 2 o'clock asking you all questions. So Carolina, I know one thing that you and I have talked a lot about, and certainly in our work here at Atlantic Bay, from a documentation standpoint, what should other organizations be prepared to encounter from a challenge standpoint as it relates to document sourcing, whether it's identification, bank statements, verification of employment? Talk to us a little bit about where you've seen this present challenges for your borrowers.
So I think that is sort of twofold, right? I think it's documentation, but I think that Charmaine touched on something earlier that's super important, and that is culture, right? Understanding the culture. And so for me specifically, right, in my culture, there's little things that sometimes can become a big problem. So one of them, for instance, we have really long names. We have usually a first, a middle name, and then a first and a second last name. Or if we're married, it's even longer. And a lot of times I think that from a consumer standpoint, they think, okay, it asks for first and last name, so that's all I'm going to put. And then we get to the part of the process where we're working with title, and then we realize that, there's another 1 or 2 last names, and, we have to repull credit, change the contract. Some of these things, go hand in hand with education on culture, right? Because that is a cultural difference. The fact that in a lot of Latin American countries, for instance, and I think in a lot of European countries as well, people are raised to think that they shouldn't really owe a lot of money. So they don't know a lot about credit. We see a lot of light credit history with our borrowers, or just really not knowing how to utilize it and how to make it the best that it can be. Not trusting banking institutions sometimes, and you would think that now we say, okay, well, it's 2021, everyone has their money in the bank. I just spoke with a borrower yesterday who told me that because he wanted to buy his home, he started putting money in his safe to make sure that he wouldn't touch it, and that's not something we can use. And so, I have to educate my clients, but I also usually have to educate my ops department. And, there's all these different movements in my client's account, but it's just that they're taking the money out to not touch it, and then they're putting it back in. So I think that a lot of it is cultural as well. And it's just understanding that. A big one, obviously, for us is statuses, right? We're immigrants, and so everyone has a different status. We work with so many different types of documentation, and so knowing what's needed for what type of buyer is really, really important. And a lot of times, I think that you touched on that earlier, it's either a lack of knowledge or a fear of the unknown, right? So if a mortgage banker that doesn't usually deal with an LEP borrower has that type of borrower, and they have, an employment authorization with political asylum, if they don't know that we can use that status, I think their mind naturally goes to, we can't not do that. So I think that part is really, really crucial. Just understanding the differences of the statuses, but also the cultural differences is really key to be able to provide a seamless experience for an LEP buyer as well.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something that for our attendees, so when we're focused on statuses, it's really with respect to non-US citizens.
Right.
And while we may have a non-US citizen borrower, they would still be eligible across a number of products and programs. And Mia, certainly, I know Freddie Mac does a really fantastic job of identifying what types of documentation are needed from non-US citizen borrowers. So this isn't something overly complex. You don't have to go and interpret the State Department guidelines. Oftentimes it's relying on your respective agencies like Freddie Mac, like Fannie Mae. So Mia, one thing that I think would be helpful is to understand what steps do you encourage your lenders to take to evaluate products and programs, what may be viable and feasible for their respective organizations. Can you talk us through the steps that a lender would take to inquire about these programs?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say the first step is to kind of sit back and just absorb the information, because a lot of times we just start, we leap, and we don't think about, what am I trying to accomplish? Well, first of all, what we want to do is make sure that we understand who our customer is, understand the borrower, put yourself in that borrower's shoes. And that's how we start. So we'll start by saying, just remembering that the borrower is, this person is trying to get from A to B to Z, which is from here in this apartment, maybe at home, to a home of their own. So I would say first, look at within your current product. Determine if you're meeting the needs. Are you working in the markets where there are LEP borrowers? If not, reach out to a resource like Freddie Mac. We have the resources, we've done the research, so we can certainly help you. So I would encourage you to partner with us if you find that your products and your resources are not aligned with ours, to help that borrower. Because remember, we're all a part of that ecosystem, so we want to make sure that we work together and to meet the needs of these LEP borrowers. The first thing, of course, is always going to be to understand them. The second is make sure that you look at your resources, check your guidelines and all of your programs that you currently have. And if not, reach out. We're here to help, because that's what we do.
I think also look within your organization. If you are looking to start the process of offering materials in a language other than English, do your employees speak the language in which you're considering offering? I know here at Atlantic Bay, we have just begun our pilot program for working with borrowers and providing materials in Spanish. And one of the first things we did was really understanding from our sales force, our mortgage bankers like Carolina, who are bilingual, who frequently are meeting the needs of their bilingual or Spanish-speaking borrowers. Because if you don't have bilingual team members on staff, that's likely going to be your first roadblock if you're looking to provide materials in a language other than English, because someone from within the organization has to be able to interact, to engage in a dialogue, and Mia, to your point, really understand who that borrower is, what their needs are. I think we're dealing with one of the three most stressful things that any person, any individual will go through in their lifetime. And that's buying a home. And for so many of us, that's such a huge step financially and with respect to just, health and happiness. So my next question, Charmaine, would be for you. As we have kind of talked in preparation for today, we had a lot of dialogue around, where does an organization start? Where do we begin? How do we identify challenges? We've spoken to all of the benefits and all of the resources available, but what are some challenges that an organization should really look to identify before taking that first step in working with borrowers? From an educational standpoint, what are some tips you would offer?
I would say look for where there's too much gray and uncertainty, and how you're interpreting the guidelines, and whether or not the guidelines are understood throughout the organization. And I would also say, look at your mindset. What is your mindset, collective mindset, around LEP and around serving LEP consumers? because you're going to find probably a lot of different interpretations. And so you want to make sure that everyone is really clear about what the business advantage is here and what the expectations are, and that they're representing it in consistent ways, that the face to the community is consistent. And the last thing I'll say is, and I think it speaks to mindset, this is not a place where you can be mostly transactional. When you talk about LEP consumers, LEP borrowers, families, communities, they tend to be more relational, right? Tend to be. There are always exceptions. So we want to say generally speaking. So if you have a very transactional mindset, you know, and you want to engage around, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they want to sort of say, well, let's talk about 2.5. So again, make sure that you have as much clarity as possible and that you understand collectively your organization's interpretation and mindset around serving LEP consumers and borrowers.
I think with clarity, you're bringing up a great point, and I want to share this story because I think it really kind of goes back to where we started in terms of the CFPB statement. And you know, what we've seen from the CFPB in recent months, recent years, is this effort to really remove a lot of the gray, if you will, from the regulatory guidelines. But about 2.5 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting and the topic of providing materials in Spanish surfaced. And someone had said, oh, you know, we can't do that because we can't provide everything in Spanish. And I said, well, why would we need to provide everything in Spanish? And they said, well, it's a regulation. And I think that I heard that often enough at multiple organizations that I really think that there was this misconception that to not run afoul of UDAP, so unfair, deceptive acts and practices, you had to be all in. So every piece of documentation in Spanish, you had to have a dedicated bilingual team. And what we found was, you know, that's really not the case, but being very clear and transparent as an organization around, here's what we will be able to offer you in your native language, but also here's what we won't, but here's the support that we can provide and offer. And so as we talk a little bit about considerations and next steps with respect to your program, I think understanding your geography, understanding your community, understanding your data. And if that's not something that you're readily familiar with, I think our NAMMBA data is a great place to start. Every organization can look through their data to get a better feel. Also looking at any of the government or agency websites to understand where they may have an LEP consumer base or concentration. You know, our focus today largely has been with Spanish-speaking borrowers, but there are certainly a number of other LEP consumers that would have a need. And as Mia, you spoke to, there are, I think you said 6 different languages that Freddie has taken steps to begin to offer materials in. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and Tony, we're going to do a couple of final thoughts, and then we'll let you ask some questions from our attendees today. But as we're kind of nearing the end, Carolina, what are your final thoughts? What do you want to leave organizations with in terms of things to consider and be mindful of while they're starting to have these conversations?
Well, I mean, I think that it's twofold, like Charmaine was saying. You know, I think that to be able to understand the community, right, that you are going to be serving, you also have to be able to have internally the right people to serve them, right? And so, you know, I think that, you know, just like our pilot program of, you know, trying to make sure that we have a team in place, not just myself and my assistant, but also support in our ops department, because, like we were saying, there's also a lot of education that has to go into how do we serve this customer, right? So I think internally, being able to have that team in place to be able to serve this client, and then also understanding the client. Not every culture is the same. And I think that a lot of cultures that are here, a lot of our LEP clients do try to conform, right, to the American culture, to their best of their ability. But I think that understanding the culture, the different types of documentation that we will need, is always the first step. For the client piece, just knowing that they will have some documentation, that the most important documentation that we provide will be in a language that they understand, is so huge. And I know that I have thanked you many, many times for this, but through my 16 years doing this, I have heard many times how important it is, how it will be a priority, and we'll get there, and one day we'll do it, to then hear what you were saying, Amanda. Well, just because compliance, we can't do it. Things like you can't even have that you speak Spanish in your signature. That is just huge for the consumer, like to know that they will be able to look at a document and fully understand what they're reading, is a huge improvement in our industry.
And Charmaine, let's hear your final thoughts, as well as any additional thoughts or comments in the DEI space.
This has just been an incredible conversation. I think about contextualized intelligence and how quickly everything is changing. And the fact that we not only have to understand where the puck is today, but where the puck is moving. So looking at the economic drivers, looking at the demographic drivers, and anticipating those outcomes as it relates to LEP and LEP consumers, recognizing while the Latinx population is the largest, demographic, the fastest growing is Asian. And as Carolina said, the communities are not monolithic. So, we can't do the off-the-shelf checkbox. There's a whole lot of very important aspects to the nuance. And so I don't think it's as simple as it used to be, where, you've got 5 or 6. I think, Mia, you said 6 today, but in another year, it could be 6 more. So pay attention to the trends, where it's going, and anticipate what that means for LEP borrowers and for your business. At the end of the day, we're talking about people. Pay attention to the numbers, but we're talking about people. Language can be isolating or not. And so that really gets to the heart of inclusion.
Fantastic. Mia, final thoughts from you?
I'm just going to wrap up everything that Carolina and Charmaine said, because it was stated so greatly. I follow that. However, I'm just going to say a successful mortgage professional is informed and educated. Freddie Mac is about educating you as a mortgage professional, because remember, that ecosystem I keep talking about, it takes all of us. So we want to make sure that we stay informed, that we educate ourselves, and that we remember who our customer is. Remember what our mission is. Our mission is to make sure that home ownership is for all. Freddie Mac has this all for home. We want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity that can, of course, apply and get that home. But we want to make sure that we are extending those opportunities to everyone. Educate yourself, reach out to us. We're here as a resource. We have a lot of resources to help. So we don't want you to think that you have to do this alone, because we are part of that ecosystem and we're here to help everyone. So just get yourself, continue to inform yourself, get educated, ask questions, let us know. We're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I turn it over to Tony, I will offer from the risk and compliance standpoint, for any risk and compliance professionals joining us, do not be hesitant to have the conversation within your organization. Understand your organization's risk appetite. I think as a compliance professional, our responsibility is to understand the regulations, but also appreciate where there's an opportunity to partner those regulations to our LEP consumers. Here at Atlantic Bay, we often will say our risk and compliance team, we're here to advise, support, and guide. So coming from a place of let's have a discussion versus the place of like, ooh, I don't think we're going to do that with respect to compliance. So I'd say be open, understand your organization's risk appetite, start the conversation, but everyone has probably captured, I would say, the one key theme throughout all of our dialogue is the one takeaway as well that I will leave you with: education. Focus on your education within your organization, not just with team members who will touch an LEP program, but education at all levels of the organization, making sure that all of your team members understand what this is, what this means, because at the end of the day, as everyone has said, these are people. Also understanding that the external facing education, going beyond providing materials in a language other than English and being able to truly offer that community education and support to your borrowers. So Tony, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for any questions or any final thoughts from you. And a huge thank you again to NAMMBA for allowing us this opportunity to start this conversation.
No, absolutely. First and foremost, shout out to Amanda, because most compliance leaders are not looked at and tell their folks, we're here to advise and provide guidance. So I love the fact that, in your role, in your eyes, you want your team and you want the great originators at Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group to understand that you're on their side. You're just there to advise and help guide versus saying no. Because when you think of compliance, every originator is thinking about, how do I get from no to yes, from a compliance standpoint. So I love how you look at and view your role first and foremost.
She listens. It's
exactly
crazy.
Exactly. So that's a great key, great benefit. Guys, as a reminder, if you have a question, please send that through the chat function. First of all, thank you guys. We've had some very great conversations and interchange. Really, as I was listening, I was like, you know what, that is a really great point, and in several areas throughout the webinar. And so I want to personally thank everyone. We do have one question that came up so far. Let's see here, going back to my chat function. What advice would you give to an organization in regards to community engagement and education with the borrower? And so from that standpoint, certainly Mia, you're out there from an outreach standpoint, and then Carolina, if you as an originator, from an originator perspective, you want to speak on that, we'll give you a few minutes. Mia?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the great question. So as Freddie Mac has, and we mentioned that, I think Tony mentioned it in the introduction, that I am a member of the Client and Community Engagement department. And that team is a client facing. Now, from my perspective, my team is, I'm more of a lender of liaison. However, we do have colleagues here at Freddie Mac that go out and they speak directly to the consumer, to the borrower. We do a lot of community outreach. We attend community fairs. We attend all types of things. And now that we are in a world where things are starting to open back up, you're going to see a lot more of that. So if you'd like us to partner with you at some particular event or something that you have going on, please let us know. We can certainly, if I can't assist you with that, I certainly have colleagues who can. So I'd like to just kind of extend that invitation.
Great. Carolina, anything you would like to add there?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we used to try and find ways to reach the community, let them know that we're here as a resource. And so now we're just like me, I was saying, we're ready to get out there again and try to reach the community in different ways. One of the ways that I think that I would say to mortgage bankers that want to serve their communities that are LEP communities is to just find where they are, what events they can go and be of value to. I used to go to the Colombian Festival, and try and take some content with me, but I didn't have anything back then. So, I'm excited to actually be able to have some marketing materials now. My assistant and I are going to be participating in, we found something locally, or she did, that's called Fashion and Compassion. And it's this, organization that brings, that helps women that, maybe just got here from wherever. It's not just Spanish speaking people, but, they give them the opportunity to have a job. And then as volunteers, we will be coming to just view what they're making as far as jewelry or whatever they're making for fashion, but also help them practice their English. And we're hoping that in volunteering on things like that, we can also educate and hopefully get them ready to in the future buy their own home.
Great, great. Charmaine, we're going to try to sneak in one quick question here. Does the NBEA have any specific programs to help educate lenders on LEP bars? Or either Amanda, if you're aware of some programs, certainly after Charmaine, feel free to add any resources there, input.
We have an incredible education department as MBA, as most of you probably know. And I am sure that there would be some resources or individuals who can help with resources if we don't have anything kind of already baked. So MBA is here to serve you and to support you in any way we can. So the short answer is we have a huge education department. I would say that we can support you. I don't know that we have an off-the-shelf brochure or anything like that we can hand over to you, but I'm confident that there would be something that we could do to support you as you continue to meet the needs of LEP borrowers.
Great. Amanda?
And I would just offer, there are a number of third parties and community organizations that have various tools available. We have found our greatest success and support from an education standpoint to be at that community level. And so Atlantic Bay does do business in 20 different states. And so I'm more than happy to have any attendees reach out to me and offer any insight or organizations that we've worked directly with. We also have really just kind of embraced frequent and routine perusal of the CFPB guidelines, as well as some of the Fannie and Freddie guidelines, products and services. And it's really just been a team effort internally here through a lot of dialogue and understanding. But there's a lot out there. So I would say find what is going to be most meaningful for your respective organization, also for your respective communities.
Great. Well, thank you today to everyone who, all of our panelists, but also everyone who joined us for this call. And certainly, again, we want to thank Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group, one of our Diamond Plus partners, for certainly helping to sponsor this call today. This concludes our webinar. We also have this recorded, so it should go out within 24 hours to everyone. And then also we have Amanda's information on the screen if you like it. Amanda Tucker at atlanticbay.com. If you have any questions or additional questions for her or any of our panelists, you can just send those to NAMMBA as well, and we'll connect them as well. Thanks a lot, guys. And we look forward to seeing everyone in Atlanta, Georgia. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Take